back to The World Today. I'm Martine Dennis. Tanya Beckett will be here in a moment with the World Business Report. But first, let's remind you of our top news stories. An Australian court has agreed that more than 400 asylum seekers who spent more than a week on a Norwegian freighter can now be transported to Papua New Guinea. A court case is still continuing, though, into whether Australia acted lawfully in refusing to accept them on Australian soil in the first place. Pressure increases on France to stop refugees trying to cross the Channel. Concern is growing in Britain over increasing numbers of illegal immigrants entering from France. It's emerged that the French are considering building another refugee camp just 30 kilometres from a Channel port. The South African President Thabo Mbeki has described the stance of the United States at the UN Racism Conference in Durban as deeply regrettable, accusing the Americans of treating racism as a subsidiary issue. Ms. Mbeki was reacting to the presence of relatively low-level delegations from the United States and other Western countries. The American envoy to the Balkans has said the military mission to Macedonia might need to be extended to prevent further fighting between the government and ethnic Albanian rebels. Later today, Parliament is set to resume its debate over political reform seen as vital to the success of the peace agreement. Time now for the latest financial news with Tanya Beckett and World Business Report.
Digging itself out of debt, KPN tells investors how it plans to survive the collapse of the Belgacom merger. And the European Parliament gets ready to slash through some of the red tape tying up Europe's companies. Hello and welcome to World Business Report. I'm Tanya Beckett. Europe's telecoms sector is impatiently waiting to hear from Dutch operator KPN as it reports its second quarter results today. The company has a lot of explaining to do after abandoning its planned merger with Belgian rival Belgacom on Friday. The purchase of third-generation mobile phone licenses has left KPN struggling under the biggest debt mountain of all of Europe's telecoms companies. The Belgacom deal was seen by many as KPN's lifeline, and investors want to know what the company plans to do next.
These are troubled times for KPN, the Dutch telecoms company, and it's not clear how they're going to find a way out. Today, company executives face a grilling from analysts and reporters as they unveil interim results. The key questions: where next after last Friday's acrimonious collapse of merger talks with Belgacom, and how can a €20 billion debt mountain be reduced?
We're looking at debt reduction of a few billion to around 20 billion by the end of June. I guess they'd have to reduce debt by at least another 8 more billion. There are several options, but the market conditions are very negative, so they have a big problem here.
KPN's share price peaked at more than €70 in March last year. Since then, it's fallen steadily. After Friday's announcement that the Belgacom deal was off, there was another sharp drop to just over €3 per share. The collapse of these talks will send ripples of concern through the boardrooms of Europe's other mobile phone operators. Saddled with high debts because of the third-generation license auctions, many of them need to shore up their positions quickly. And that'll mean more merger talks, restructuring, or even possibly the breakup of telecoms companies.
Wholesale restructuring, selling significant assets, either overseas assets or doing what BT has undertaken, which is splitting the business, demerging, selling off significant pieces, but significant restructuring amongst these companies so that in a couple of years' time they look completely different than they did today. And frankly, their ambition will be curtailed significantly as a result.
It seems clear that KPN won't look the same before long. The Dutch government owns a third of the company. Like other shareholders, it can only hope that today's results announcement contains some morsel of good news to lighten KPN's deepening gloom. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Well, let's take a quick look at the markets, and this picture could change quite dramatically this week because, of course, many traders coming back from their holidays, particularly in Europe and the US. Well, let's start with Asia, where the stock markets are well into their trading day. Most indices started the day down, responding, of course, to the falls that we saw in New York. You can see the Nikkei in Tokyo off just about 82 points there, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong off well over 100 points. Let's move now to Europe, and this is how the main bourses will start their week in the next few hours, as well as KPN's results. Watch out for news from Spain's telecoms leader, Telefónica, which releases first half figures today. And let's take a look at what's happening on the US markets. Of course, we have Labor Day today, so that'll be fairly quiet in the US. Europe's markets may lack direction because, as I say, it's a bit of a break therefore. So the markets closed in the US, and this is how the Dow and the Nasdaq ended last week. Up just about 30 points and the Nasdaq up 13. Let's take a look at how the currency markets have been doing. And you can see the euro-dollar rate shows the euro not really to have capitalised on the gains that it made last week, just about short of 91 cents at the moment. Euro-yen at 108.34, dollar-yen at 119. As I say, and I should stress, that picture could well change this week when we see traders coming back from their holidays. Well, let's now move to the British Employers Group, the CBI. It's released its latest survey of British companies, and it contains some rather chilling news. A slowdown in the UK's manufacturing sector is by now well documented, of course, but according to the CBI's research, the slowdown is now hitting the service sector as well. For more on that, let's go straight to the London Stock Exchange, where Manisha Tang is waiting to tell us more. Manisha.
Tanya, thanks very much. Well, to go over these chilling figures from the CBI, and this was a survey of more than 200 firms in the service sector in the UK. It was done in conjunction with Deloitte & Touche, the consulting firm, started back in November 1998. That's important because the sentiment about the service sector in the UK is now, so far as the latest survey is concerned, is showing that profitability and optimism have fallen at their fastest rate since the survey began. Now, obviously, the statisticians at the CBI like to put these surveys out with some numbers that we can all understand. I'm going to try and explain them for you. If you take away the number of pessimists from the number of optimists, you'll be left with a minus percentage. Now, just to compare May's figures with these current figures for the survey, the business situation in the professional services sector generally is at minus 50%, and that compares with May's figure of minus 8%. So there's evidence of that dramatic decline in how firms in the UK are beginning to view orders and purchasing coming through in the service sector. Profitability has also fallen in professional services. It's at a balance of minus 35% this time around. That compares to a balance of minus 16% that was recorded for May. Now let's just talk about consumer services, and this is where we start to roll in factors like Britain's foot and mouth crisis, which certainly did affect the service sector over the summer months and certainly during the springtime. First of all, consumer services firms have found that the weakness in that sector is beginning to spread more widely beyond the foot and mouth crisis, and that's leading experts to believe that perhaps this is all much more broad-based than we thought, something the Bank of England will have to take on board this week when it decides on interest rates.
This morning, and KPN in particular, but Colt Telecom of the UK facing a cash crisis, it seems.
Yes, it seems so. Now I'm going to take you over to the board just to have a look at the essential numbers on Colt Telecom. We are down dramatically over the year, as you can see. They did say earlier in the year that though revenues were looking okay, their sales were down. And this is important because the management there is well respected, and it cables through 30 European countries, and it's a very highly respected network, certainly billed as state-of-the-art. But there seems to be some wrangling going on between Citi analysts and Colt Telecom about their valuation. They appear to be facing a funding gap of about £600 million. Tanya.
Manisha, thank you very much indeed. That was Manisha Tang joining us there from the London Stock Exchange. And let's now go straight to our Singapore bureau, where Lynette Tai is standing by. And there's some good news out of Japan today for the telecoms industry, it seems, Lynette.
Yes, indeed, Tanya. Well, Japan's NTT Docomo is to launch the world's first third-generation mobile service on October the 1st. We're expecting details to be revealed later today. The commercial launch was originally slated for last May, but Japan's largest mobile phone operator postponed it because there were not enough stable connections. At the time, it rolled out trial 3G services for 4,500 corporate and individual users instead.
Lynette, let's talk a little bit more about what might be happening in India. It seems that the privatisation plans there are going a little bit awry.
That's right, Tanya. Plans to sell off part of the loss-making Air India have been grounded for the moment after Singapore Airlines pulled out of bidding for the carrier. Now, SIA, jointly with the Tata Group, were the only bidders for Air India. The sale of Air India is seen as crucial to the government's privatisation programme. PK Basu of Credit Suisse First Boston says that a weekend cabinet reshuffle should help get the country's privatisation programme back on track.
The focus of the reshuffle almost entirely is on privatization. There are 3 new ministers in tourism, in telecommunications and in civil aviation. All 3 are likely to push the privatization program and are likely to work closely with the new Minister for Privatization, who has now become a full cabinet minister, to push the program. So I think privatization will be a big beneficiary.
And still on the aviation industry, shares in Air New Zealand slumped to a record low today. This fall comes after the airline delayed announcing its full-year figures and refinancing plans until later this week. UK entrepreneur Richard Branson says he is considering buying a stake in the troubled carrier, which is expected to post a loss of about $88 million. Meanwhile, in South Korea, creditors of the world's 3rd largest chip maker are meeting to decide whether to throw a lifeline to the debt-ridden company. A decision on whether to bail out Hynix Semiconductor is expected in the next 2 or 3 days. Analysts say non-bank creditors are reluctant to roll over almost $1 billion worth of Hynix bonds maturing by year's end, and that could force the firm into bankruptcy. Well, that's it from me for today. Back to you, Tanya.
Lynette, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Singapore. So there you have it. UK banking giant, meanwhile, HSBC, is radically changing the way its equity analysts work. According to the Financial Times, HSBC analysts will soon be required to make as many sell recommendations as buys. Investment banks around the world have come in for fierce criticism lately for how many buy recommendations they make. Analysts have been accused of talking up stocks in the hope of generating corporate finance work for their bank. Europe's banking industry could be in for major upheaval if press speculation of a major cross-border tie-up is correct. According to weekend newspaper reports in Germany and the UK, Germany's Commerzbank is close to being taken over by Italy's Unicredito. The German bank, the country's 4th largest, has been the subject of many takeover rumours since its plans to merge with German rival Dresdner Bank fell apart last year. And the balance of power among Europe's biggest retailers has shifted, it seems. According to figures out from the analysis service Retail Intelligence, the UK's supermarket chain Tesco has now become the 2nd biggest retailer in Europe, overtaking its French rival Intermarché. It's second only to the other French supermarket giant Carrefour. Retail Intelligence measures the size of retailers by sales. Another supermarket, Ahold from Holland, is the biggest mover in the annual survey, rising from 20th largest to 13th. The slowdown in the global economy may have one benefit for companies. They might find their travel budgets shrinking. According to research from American Express, price rises for business class airfares and hotel rooms have slowed dramatically. On some routes in Europe, airline tickets in business class are actually getting cheaper as airlines struggle to fill the seats. Watching World Business Report, still to come on the programme. It's been 42 years since Professor Sanders came up with the idea of having a company incorporated in Europe rather than a specific country. And today, the European Parliament finally gets to debate the matter. We report on the dream of the truly European firm. And now for a look at some of the top UK stories today. Troubled insurer Equitable Life gave an optimistic assessment of its financial health just days before cutting the value of pension funds by 16%, according to the Financial Times. On July the 16th, policyholders were informed of the cuts, but no mention of the move had been made at a meeting with leading actuaries Bacon and Woodrow on July the 10th. The report goes on to say that Equitable Life has since admitted that such behaviour was wholly inappropriate. The Nationwide is bracing itself for hard times ahead by rationing big mortgages. The UK's 3rd largest lender is going to make it harder for house hunters to borrow large amounts of money. This cautious approach reflects cutbacks in a city where generous bonuses and salaries have fueled demand for hefty loans. The Nationwide fears the big city earners are most vulnerable to a slowdown in the property market. And MG Rover is back in contact with Malaysia's Proton Motor Corporation and its UK sports car arm group Lotus. They're collaborating on engineering and technical projects for new models. Whilst the new mid-range vehicle could continue to use the platform of the Rover 75, a new platform will be needed for the smaller Rover 25. There could be significant savings for both Rover and Proton to share the costs of such development and use the engineering expertise of Group Lotus. Despite much talk of an economic slowdown in the latest survey by the Alliance and Leicester, small businesses are optimistic about their prospects over the next quarter. Of the 500 small businesses questioned, 60% expect no change to their business in the autumn months, and more than one-third say they intend to expand the business. Only 3% of the companies surveyed say they expected to downsize. And now for a quick look at how the financial markets are doing here in London at the start of the week. No one's expecting any dramatic movements today, given that the United States is closed for the Labour Day holiday. However, investors will be hoping that the FTSE can show a little more strength than at the end of last week. On Friday, the 100 index barely scraped into positive territory, while the 250 mid-cap index and the tech mark both registered modest falls. Today, things to look out for will be results from Pizza Express and also from the house builder Wilson Connolly. And against the dollar, the pound, as you can see, is currently at 1.45. Traders coming back, of course, after the holidays this week. You're watching World Business Report on the World Today, and over now to Martine for the news headlines.
Tanya, thanks very much indeed. A court in Australia has given the go-ahead for the removal of hundreds of mainly Afghan refugees to Papua New Guinea. And pressure increases on France to stop asylum seekers trying to cross the Channel.
And in business, investors wait for KPN to unveil Plan B after the collapse of its merger with Belgacom. And businesses around Europe look to the Parliament to save them time and money. Now, there's a flurry of rumours surrounding the German banking sector. For more on that, it's over to Richard Edgar, our Reuters correspondent in Frankfurt. Richard, not the first time that we've heard talk about Commerzbank, which of course is Germany's fourth largest bank.
That's right. Well, these rumours started floating around on Friday that it might be involved in an agreed takeover by Unicredito, which is Italy's second largest bank. And it's not the first time, as you mentioned, it's been considered quite a weak bank since it had to abandon its takeover or merger with Dresdner Bank last year, and it's since then pursued a go-it-alone policy. Now, a lot of people, Cobra in particular, a shareholder group which owns 10% of the bank, doesn't like that, and it says that over the weekend it said that it would sell its stake if the price were right. Sal Oppenheim, a private bank, said in a research note last week that it thinks that there will be a takeover of Commerzbank in the next 6 to 9 months because it says it's simply too small. It doesn't have the critical mass to go it alone. And neither of the banks is commenting at the moment, but the market says that it's credible, or it seems to think that way because Commerzbank's shares rose 3% on Friday as these first rumours started floating around, and Unicredito's fell. The newspapers think that there's going to be announcements possibly a week today when Unicredito gives its first half results. So that's something that we might be watching there.
One bank that does, you would have thought, have the critical mass to go it alone, but is always looking around, is Deutsche Bank.
That's right, very large bank, and it's also been involved in some takeover rumours. Over the weekend, Welt am Sonntag newspaper said that it possibly is going to be involved in a merger of equals with Barclays. Now, it does make some sense because the chief executive of Deutsche Bank has said that he wants to increase the number of customers that the bank has from 11 million to 20 million. The only way you could do that would be by making some acquisition. But the paper gives no source. The banks once again make no comment, but banking sources tell Reuters that there's no substance to this rumour at all. And it does highlight the fact that there's room for consolidation in the banking sector here in Germany.
Very briefly, a comment on Deutsche Telekom. Some more shares could be coming back to the market today.
That's right. The markets are poised for a flowback of shares there. These are related to the VoiceStream purchase that Telecom made in May, and they've been involved in a lock-up period which expired on Saturday. So today's the first day of trading. We may be looking for that, but the market seems to think that a lot of this has been priced in.
Richard, thanks for joining us from Frankfurt. So that's your roundup from the German financial capital. Let's now move to America, where last week the Dow Jones slipped below the 10,000 mark for the first time since April and failed to get back above it. So what now? Here's Patrick O'Connell from the Nasdaq in New York.
Tanya, it's a case of happy holidays for the US markets. Monday, a much needed break from a dismal month. Just last week, of course, the Dow Jones lost 500 points in 4 sessions, and they'll be hoping for a much better September. Before I look ahead to next week, let me just contemplate where we left things. The Dow, as you know, on Thursday slipped through 10,000, and you'll see that although it rose slightly, with some bargain hunters clearly in evidence, it's still back beneath that mark. The experts say it doesn't mean anything. It's the same number as above 10,000, but ordinary investors who feel beaten up might recall this was the week beneath 10,000. Here's the week on the Nasdaq where we are right now. And you can see this slump of some 10%, 11%, with the last session of the week a small uptick, which is proved by this graph, which we've also got available for lovers of graphs, the day on the Nasdaq ending up 13. And it was here, of course, Michael Jackson was earlier in the week, proving to investors there's nothing normal about this market. Finally, a reminder of what we expect in the coming week. First of all, remember that Monday there's nothing, and Tuesday sessions begin all over again. We have monthly unemployment figures, productivity, we have an indication of manufacturing. It's a week plump with economic numbers. The number crunchers will be out there checking for signs there's any pressure on consumers and look for a slight uptick in unemployment. For now, though, from the Nasdaq market site in Times Square, that's it for now.
Patrick, thank you. The US markets love to have those high-profile visitors, don't they? Well, there may have been more strong words of support for the euro from Europe's financial leaders. In Germany, Finance Minister Hans Eichel announced on Sunday that the euro is stronger than the Deutschmark in its relationship with other currencies. Mr. Eichel's remarks were met with disbelief among members of the German public visiting the finance ministry, but Mr. Eichel insisted the size of the eurozone economy means that the euro is less prone to fluctuations on the money market. And it looks likely that the Bank of England will leave interest rates unchanged when it meets this week. Various surveys of economists show the vast majority expect rates to be left at 5%. Although various signs point to a slowdown in the UK economy, the bank can take heart from the IMF's research, which suggests the British economy will be the fastest growing amongst the G7 countries this year. British Telecom's long-awaited demerger of its wireless business is expected to get underway this week. Analysts are expecting to be briefed on plans for the new company and possibly even its new name. Reports over the weekend suggest BT Wireless has managed to reduce the amount of debt that it has to inherit from its parent company. Shares in the new firm are expected to start trading in November. The European Parliament will today debate a new law which could save Europe's multinational corporations time and money. The European Companies Statute is a directive which will allow companies trading in several EU states to register just once in a standard way in only one of them, rather than having to be incorporated separately in each state. The statute has been argued over and lobbied for more than 40 years.
March 2001. Marks & Spencer workers in France protested the company's plans to pull out of the country. The French government accused M&S of not consulting its employees first, so breaching French labour law. M&S ultimately backed down and consulted its workforce. But such conflicts could become a thing of the past once the European Companies Statute comes into force. It's something that Professor Sanders has been dreaming of for the best part of half a century.
I was very happy that finally the SE, which more or less became a sleeping beauty, was kissed by the prince and brought to life again. And that's a happy end, I think.
But not everyone sees today's debate and tomorrow's vote as an ending of any sort. The European Employers Federation thinks that after all the debate, there is still a fundamental flaw in the proposals. the lack of a common tax regime across the 15 countries that make up the Union.
Without an accompanying suitable fiscal regime, it is unlikely that the European Company Statute would be of sufficient interest to many companies.
Despite the many reservations that remain, no one wants to reopen the arguments over the compromise that was reached at the Nice summit earlier in the year. So now it's just down to the European Parliament to ratify the plans and put the statute into law. As for Professor Sanders, he's confident that the Parliament will give the statute the go-ahead this week, a suitable present for his 90th birthday later this month. Nils Blythe, BBC News.
Well, time for a last update on how the world's financial markets are looking at the moment. In Asia, you can see that the stock exchange is still open there. Japan down just about 100 points. The Hang Seng down 151. Of course, the US today closed for Labour Day. Let's move to Europe. This is how the main indices finished last week. Today could be dominated very well by the telecoms, as well as numbers from KPN in Holland. Spain's Telefonica will be releasing half-year results also. And the US markets, as I say, closed today for Labour Day, but the Dow's failure to crawl back above 10,000 still weighing rather heavily on stocks around the world. And here is a brief look at the currencies. The euro still hanging around that 91 cents level. And of course, if you want to get in touch with us, you can send emails to biznews@bbc.co.uk. I'm Tanya Beckett. That's all from the moment from World Business Report.
And I'm Martine Dennis. You've been watching The World Today.
Thanks.
Hello there. The week ahead promises to be quite a mixed bag. Certainly for Northern Ireland and Scotland here, we're always going to have some showery outbreaks of rain. Further south for England and Wales, still going to keep a fair amount of cloud around, but at least should be drier. Temperatures are going to be about what we'd be expecting for this time of year, but on Tuesday those winds take a nosedive from the north, so certainly along the east coast taking the edge off them, before later on in the week they return to a warmer westerly direction. So through the night and into the morning we're going to see some cloud and rain working its way up. So it's a southeast corner that's always going to have some heavier downpours. So if you are out and about on the road, you will need to take care, because there could be some fairly tricky driving conditions with surface water and spray. But as the morning goes on, that will edge its way out towards the continent. Much of England and Wales will always keep more cloud. The brightest weather further north, but that will be found in between some fairly heavy showers, and those showers becoming more widespread as the day goes on. Northeastern parts of Scotland always going to have more cloud with some persistent rain. Chance that we could hear some thundery outbreaks as well. Temperatures in Scotland at best 17 degrees for Edinburgh. We're looking a little bit cooler, 16 for Belfast. The warmest of the weather is likely to be in the southeast corner, where we'll keep the driest of the weather, certainly for the afternoon. On Tuesday we can see the tightening of those isobars. That's where we had those blustery northerly winds. But things should at least be dry out to the west with a nudge of high pressure. And then as we go through to Wednesday, once again we see more Atlantic weather fronts that are set to slip their way southwards on Thursday, bringing more cloud and some patchier outbreaks of rain. So for Tuesday it's down that east coast with that wind and some showers as well. The showers could be quite heavy, drier out to the west. But as the afternoon goes on and certainly into the evening, we'll notice that cloud thickening out towards the northwest. That will then work its way through Scotland and into northern parts of England on Wednesday. Southern areas keeping hold of some drier weather, but we could just see those showers continuing in East Anglia. Then on Thursday it promises to be a much drier day, although still a fair amount of cloud around. Temperatures about average for the time of year, so we could see a high of 22 degrees. And then on Friday we hope to see the sunshine returning, but there'll be more rain in the northwest.
5 minutes gone. Manchester United 0, Arsenal 0. Great game in prospect. John Murray, White Hart Lane.
Redrove's volley after 6 minutes, 1-0 to Spurs. Ron Jones at Elland Road.
A lead penalty appeal turned down. Stuart Hall.
Oh, it's 1-0. Emil Hiskey thundering through like a wildebeest, Liverpool looking imperious.
Villa have snatched the point.
Live exclusive coverage of every Premiership game from BBC Radio 5 Live. Gibbs has scored.
The scene 7,500 miles away in Christmas Island, where this plane will fly supplies to the boatload of Afghan refugees just off the coast.
Today could be the day they'll finally start the next stage in their asylum-seeking journey. Hello and welcome to Breakfast from BBC News with Darren Jordan and Sian Williams.
It's 6 o'clock on Monday, the 3rd of September. The headlines.